Welcome and good afternoon. I am Robert Yates, President of EMD Millipore. I'm very honored today to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Marijn Dekkers, Chairman of the Management Board of Bayer AG based in Leverkusen, Germany. I know he's no stranger to many of you in the room who knew him as the CEO of Thermo Fisher Scientific. Marijn will speak to us today about innovation. Who needs it? I can tell you personally, I spend a lot of time talking, focusing around innovation, and as a company, we spend a lot of money investing in it. In this room today, we have a wide spectrum of businesses and industries represented, from healthcare to banking, insurance to publishing, just to name a few. What does innovation mean in all of your boardrooms? As leaders, are we fostering innovation in an effective way? We're privileged to hear from Marijn, who has built a distinguished career driving innovation. He started that career as a scientist at General Electric Corporation, where he authored more than 30 patents, which to date generate over $1 billion in sales. He left General Electric after 10 years, but just a few months ago, found his way back to the company. Today, he sits on General Electric's board of directors. That's impressive. What a great accomplishment. As the CEO of Thermo Fisher Scientific, he overhauled the company, streamlining the corporate structure, focusing the business on life sciences, orchestrating a $10 billion merger with Fisher Scientific, a bold move that more than doubled the size of the company. In 2010, Marijn was named chairman of the management board at Bayer. He's the first outside hire in Bayer's 148-year history to be chosen to lead the company. That's a true reflection of his leadership. And after just 2 years, his impact is being felt. The overall business is performing very well. Bayer's healthcare business is well positioned with 4 potential blockbuster drugs in the pipeline, and he's changing the face of the company, addressing complexity, streamlining decision-making, and focusing on workplace diversity. None of this happens without a profound understanding of the importance of innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming back to Boston Dr. Marijn Dekkers. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much all for coming today on this beautiful Boston day. Robert, thanks for that kind introduction. I would also like to thank Boston College and Peter Rollins for the opportunity to speak to you today. It's really good to be back in Boston, and particularly at this very, very prestigious event, the CEO Club of Boston. Always an interesting group of representatives of the Boston scene, as I have experienced it over the years. And I also really look forward to your questions afterwards, some discussion. So I have titled my speech this afternoon, maybe somewhat provocatively, Innovation, Who Needs It? It is a topic very near and dear to my heart, because behind this is the observation that almost everyone in Western societies will agree that innovation is very important, that it's really the key to our future well-being, but yet we see trends that innovative technologies are sometimes not really appreciated, valued, or even accepted by society. So we all agree we need innovation. It's paramount for our future. For companies, of course, innovation leads to better products. It makes us more competitive, and competition is already hard enough in this very global world. Also, developed societies increasingly face challenges to preserve and further improve our standard of living, and for that, innovation is, of course, required. And then countries, and particularly so-called Western countries, in order to stay ahead of the curve, in order to stay ahead of competition with the rising emerging markets, we need innovation. And then finally, society, we as humans need innovation to address some of the really urgent challenges in the world with growing world population and scarcity of resources. So simply put, we need innovation. We are aware that we need to foster more and better innovation. But I think equally important, we need to promote societal acceptance of innovation and appreciation of innovation. And on this topic, I would like to share some thoughts with you this afternoon. But before I do that, I would like to tell you a little bit about Bayer. We were fooling around with the aspirin. Aspirin is, of course, a well-known Bayer product, but it's not just all about aspirin. Bayer has almost 150 years of tradition. We celebrate our anniversary next year, and the history of the company is very focused on innovation. That has always been our competitive weapon, our livelihood. We will have revenues of about 40 billion euros this year, 115,000 employees globally, of which 13,000 are in R&D. We have three divisions. One is healthcare, where we, of course, have a large pharmaceutical presence with prescription drugs, but also an over-the-counter business, with aspirin being obviously one brand that you know. Aleve is probably, for some of you, weekend warriors, a well-known product. Yeah. And then one-a-day vitamins or Flintstone vitamins and a whole series of other products. The other division we have is crop sciences, where we make seeds for crops and crop protection products to help farmers improve the yield of their crops. And then one third division is material science, which is focused on polymers and the use of polymers for resource efficiency. Now, Bayer's mission is science for a better life. And this mission really, I have to say, motivates me, of course, as having started my career as a scientist. It sort of says everything about Bayer. We try with chemistry and biology to come up with molecules that in the end really improve the life of us humans, animals as well, and then also help crops be stronger to again be beneficial for humans and animals. So in this business model, you need to really foster innovation. I actually see, and I'm very open about this also with our own employees, innovation as the core capability and our core competitive weapon. We are, just like our competitors, big, but everybody is big. We have good employees, everybody has good employees. We have access to capital, well, pretty much everybody has access to capital. We're all global. I think in the end, the real differentiating factor for companies like ours is our ability to innovate. So what is it that we're really doing? As I said, with our products, we are trying to address some of the key societal challenges, particularly in nutrition and healthcare. So drivers are, you know that, I don't know what you learned in school, but I learned in school that there were 3 billion people on the face of the earth. Right now, we're 7 billion people, and in 35 to 40 years, there will be 9 billion people. Also, those people are living longer and longer, as you know. In the last 50 years, the average age of a person on the face of the earth increased from 58 to 70. Not the average age, but the average age at which a person dies, of course, sorry. So that is every 3 years, the average age at which a person dies has increased by a year, every 3 years. Enormous progress that has been made. And then, of course, particularly in emerging markets, a huge middle class is developing of people who want to live longer, who want to eat better, and actually have the money to do so. So what does that mean for us? One thing is obvious. When more people need to eat, we need to be able to create more nutrition, more crops. And the interesting thing is that people don't just want to eat more, they also want to eat meat. And this is a challenge because the demand for food, high quality food, is rapidly increasing. And in order to produce 1 unit of meat, you actually need 7 units of feed, for instance, corn. So the demand on production of corn and soya and wheat, those type of crops, has increased dramatically without more arable land becoming available in the world. And this is what our crop sciences division is working on. Also, as people are getting older, we need more innovative healthcare products. More and more, as people get older, we are suffering from non-communicable diseases, but diabetes, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis. And we should not forget that really only for 1/3 of the diseases that we know is a cure possible at the moment. 2/3 of the diseases do not have an available effective therapy. Now, there has been great progress in the last years. Also, I think because the innovative pharmaceutical industry has come up with a lot of new innovative drugs that has helped us to manage diseases much better. Just think about HIV, for instance, which 30 years ago was an absolute death sentence, or cancer. 30 years ago, 2/3 of patients died from cancer, while today more than half hope for a permanent cure. But as I said, still much more needs to be done, because we don't just want to live longer, we are living longer, but we also want to live healthy lives. Now, there is some concern at the moment about the productivity, the efficiency of the drug discovery industry. People say the pipelines are drying up, it has gotten harder and harder, and it's true, it has gotten harder and harder. Quite a few pharma companies are experiencing a dry spell in their pipelines. We are fortunate at Bayer that we have some very good products in the pipeline, and we're committed to the R&D model. I'm actually personally convinced that we are again at the verge of tremendous breakthrough opportunity and innovation in pharmaceutical research. And I think this is driven, and maybe I'm a little biased saying that with a history of Thermo Fisher Scientific, but there has been tremendous progress in analytical tools, analytical analysis for the pharmaceutical industry, which allows us to much better understand at a cellular level what is happening and what is driving certain disease patterns at a biochemical level. I think the best example of that is the genome sequencing project. You've all heard of that. 12 years ago, the human genome was sequenced. It costed $3 billion to do so, and it took 12 years. Well, now the sequence can happen in just a few days for around $2,000. It's really an illustration of the progress that has been made, and this type of insight will allow us to, at a very detailed level, understand what's going on in cells, as I said, and then create appropriate therapies around this. So let me now get into the importance of innovation for a company like Bayer, but also for society. We, as Bayer, live from innovation. I mentioned this, but we are not alone. Pretty much every company will say innovation is what is key to us. Actually, with globalization, every country is now also saying that innovation is key to us, not just Western countries. I sometimes meet with leading politicians in emerging countries like China or Colombia or Russia, and they all stress that they want to foster innovation-driven industries. And what they expect from us Western countries is that we don't just sell our products there, but more and more we have to make a commitment that we will build laboratories in these countries, that we will build advanced manufacturing plants, or that we foster close relationships with universities. And there are statistics that they really mean what they say. For example, for the first time in 2011, China applied for more global patents than the United States, just as an example. So these emerging countries want to get away from just basic manufacturing, low-tech stuff, higher up in the value chain, from basic manufacturing to more sophisticated production, and ultimately become innovation drivers themselves. So the world has become extremely competitive. Innovation determines competitiveness, and increasingly, not just of companies, but also of countries. So the question is, if you're a CEO of a big company like Bayer, what do you do to foster innovation? And I see it as my job to foster innovation at Bayer as well as I can. So one of the things you have to do is you have to be prepared to spend enormous amounts of money. We spend €3 billion a year just on R&D, and as I said, 13,000 employees. One example of how much it costs to develop a drug is we just came out with a new drug, Xarelto it's called, that is a blood thinner, blood controller that helps prevent blood clots and therefore helps prevent stroke with people, for instance, who suffer from heart arrhythmia, atrial fibrillation. And it can actually reduce the number of strokes of patients who take this by 2/3, so very significant. It costed us €2 billion to develop this drug before we sold a single pill. Secondly, you have to not just be prepared to spend a lot of money, but you have to be very patient. The Xarelto example, it took us 12 years to go from idea in the lab to the first sales. And in crop science, it often takes 8 or 9 years from the beginning of a development to actually the first sales. Another area that I think is very important for companies to drive innovation is to focus on what you're actually good at. And we were kidding about aspirin. Aspirin is not just a painkiller, but as you know, also a blood thinner. And this core competency in aspirin and understanding how blood thins or coagulates has led to a certain expertise in Bayer that has allowed us to come up with a variety of other products in the cardiovascular sphere. So building on a core competency and then staying with it and trying to come up with other solutions is, I think, very important. Then, of course, have good people. It doesn't really help if you, as a CEO, say to scientists what they should be doing, because by definition, they will not listen. But it does help to say, go and talk to the customer. Go talk to a patient or a doctor, or go talk to a farmer. That works. And therefore, I think the connectivity between the people who are doing the innovations and where the innovations actually ends up is very important. And then what we increasingly focus on, which is not necessarily a core competency for very traditional innovation-driven companies, is to create an open innovation model. There's more partnerships, working with universities, working with startups, doing more licensing. Something, as I said, doesn't come always natural, but it is what we're trying to do. So these are the areas we focus on within the company. Now, what about countries? Right? I have learned that doing a good job at innovation as a company is only half the job. The other half is then hoping for the right environment to get these innovations accepted and appreciated. and be able to commercialize them for a reasonably good financial return. Now, politicians have an amazing influence in determining the right environment for fostering an appreciation of innovation. And I have to say, their decisions are not always courageous. Increasingly also, the NGOs, non-governmental organizations, have great influence on whether innovations are accepted or not. So you can summarize this really in two main points. We need in a country or society, first of all, an environment that fosters innovation, and then secondly, an environment that has acceptance and appreciation for innovation embedded in society. And these 2 points do not always go hand in hand, and I'll look a little bit, I'll tell you a little bit about that in some examples later. So when you want to foster innovation as a country, what do you do? What do you focus on? First of all, we focus on the ability to get really good talent. Right? And the countries that are really good in this are countries like Switzerland, Finland, Singapore, just to name a few. There is a study that is being done that's called the PISA study. You may have heard of this. And the PISA study analyzes the capability in math and science of young high school students. And I have very good news for you. The US improved from 2006 to 2009. In math, we are now 31st in the world, and in science, we are 23rd. Closely followed by countries like Portugal and Hungary. Okay? And I'm saying this facetiously because I do believe this is an enormous issue and challenge for the US. We have great universities. Actually, I've been told once that within the 128 corridor around Boston, there are 120 colleges and universities. But our high schoolers in science and math are really behind countries that are sort of growing and becoming more and more competitive. And this is really, I think, one of the top priorities for the US to see how we can get an improvement in this that is substantial. Another challenge for countries is IP protection. In the Western world, that's well developed, but you read about issues in China. Increasingly also India is becoming very reluctant to respect IP from Western countries, and that is a challenge for us. Now, a third area where I think the US excels is the access to capital for innovative ideas. And basically with that I mean venture capital. Startups, technologies that are in universities where venture capitalists fund startup companies as a mechanism to get the technology out of the university and then ultimately in the hands probably of larger companies, or the startup just develops in and of itself. When I moved to Boston in 2000, I became member of the Longwood Tennis Club. Maybe some of you are members there as well. And tried to make some friends and tennis partners. And it turned out that half of my friends were in venture capital. Okay? And the other half were sort of living from the venture capitalists. But this was 2000. So then I moved to Germany, and I still have to find a single friend who is actually a venture capitalist. So I did some research on this, and it turns out that in the US, triple the amount of the GDP is spent in venture capital than in Germany. This is, I believe, a huge advantage for this country, again, as an ability to take what the universities are doing into real life. And when I asked a German friend, how come that there is so little venture capitalism in Germany? So, well, first of all, we're a little risk-averse, but the second thing is that, here, the professors do not want to get rich. The rich want to become professor. And that's a line I've never heard in Boston. So So this differentiates us, and I do believe this differentiation is something we should really, really nurture. Another area that affects, I think, the basic makeup and what countries are good in and not so good in is taxes. And again, you know, if you're a scientist, you think, oh, taxes, I don't have to worry about this. But then as you grow older, you see how much effect it has on the infrastructure and the priorities in a country. I'll give you one example. Again, the VC example. In the US, when you buy a VC firm, you can carry forward the losses of the VC firm. So from a tax point of view, that's advantageous. In Germany, you can't. Okay, so you know, with taxes, you can also create an environment where VC, for instance, is either positive or negative, and you can influence almost an industry like that. Now, another example is, you may have heard of the German word Mittelstand. Right? All those friends I'm now playing tennis with in Germany, they're not venture capitalists, but they're actually often owners of private companies. 100, 200, 300 million in sales. Now, I don't know anybody in Boston, I don't, who owns a 200 million company that has actually been in the family for 3 or 4 generations. Right? Because here, from a tax point of view, you know, you try to give more than 7 million to the next generation, you pay 50% tax. Right? So it's great to want to avoid dynasties, but the side effect is that you have relatively little mid-sized companies that survive a generation. This is completely different in Germany, and this is why the infrastructure of small companies is so much stronger there, and it actually provides a huge employment opportunity to have so many relatively small but stable companies. So, having said that in terms of country competitiveness, I just want to talk a little bit about societal appreciation and acceptance of innovation. I'm going to do it with 2 examples. First, the appreciation for prescription drugs. There is tremendous pressure all over the world in countries to bring down the prices for prescription drugs. And you probably think, okay, there's a guy comes from a prescription drug company, he's of course going to complain about that, and you're right. I am going to complain about it, but I'll try to do it in some type of balanced way. The danger of pushing prices of prescription drugs down, down, and down is that at some point the business model to invest in these drugs, to develop them, as I said, is expensive, it takes a long time, will lose its attractiveness. And we are, of course, aware that healthcare system costs in some countries are out of control and need to be brought back. And it's very easy to just focus on the pharma companies to go and get the money with lower drug prices. But in the end, the profits that we make on the current drugs really source and fund the R&D of the drugs in the future. And this balance needs to be put in context. From an appreciation of innovation point of view, if I would ask all of you, what is the brand of your car? You could probably tell me without looking. If I would ask you, what is the brand of your mobile device? I think you could tell me without looking. But if I would ask you the last time you went to a doctor and you really didn't feel so good, and the doctor prescribed a drug, do you have any idea who actually invented or developed this drug? And do you really have actually an appreciation for the company who did that? Just like you have an appreciation for the 5th iPhone version of Apple, or and I ask you to you know, think sort of for a second about this, of do I have my priorities straight in that sense? And also another last example I want to make about acceptance of innovation. I have bad or good news for you today, but we all ate genetically modified food today. Did you know that? We all ate genetically modified food, and we've been doing this for 15 years in the United States. In Europe, there is no genetically modified food. Zero. It is on that continent absolutely not accepted as a technology. It is completely safe, and there have been a huge number of studies on this, but it simply has not been accepted there. We have in Europe nice tomatoes already and good potatoes, so if we don't need it, we do not accept it. Right? In the meantime, 160 million hectares, so three times that much in acres, are being farmed with genetically modified food in the world. The number is growing by 10%. And we have in Europe left this whole opportunity go by the wayside. We're doing experiments in the lab with seeds in which we slice in a gene tobacco plants. And when you don't give those tobacco plants water for 3 weeks, they, of course, they pretty much fall apart. They look bad. When you then give them water, the one that didn't have this gene sliced in is dead forever. The other one in 2 days perks right up. Okay, this is how far this type of technology can go. This is still lab type of stuff, but think about the drought in the US this summer and how simple genetically modified capabilities can really make a difference in terms of yields. So I'll wrap it up. Just want to say it's of course easy to say society doesn't appreciate innovation. The truth is we as companies, particularly pharmaceutical companies, also have a great responsibility in this respect. We at Bayer are very convinced that our science for a better life is indeed leading to a better life, but there are always people who doubt this, who worry about our intentions, about our side effects of drugs, or the safety of chemical plants, or the legality or ethicality of marketing practices in the pharmaceutical industry. And it's very important, I think, as pharmaceutical industry in particular, to accept this challenge from society and work very hard to earn our license to operate. We're doing that, we're trying to do that by talking very openly about the good parts, but also the challenges of certain technologies, and increasingly trying to partner up with spokespeople from outside the company, even outside the industry, to create a very balanced view. So with that, I hope I've been able to give you a little bit of an insight into my strong conviction that innovation is very much needed, and some of the challenges for companies, for countries, for cultures, for continents that come with the appreciation and the acceptance of innovation. So thank you very much for your attention.
Excuse me. Okay, Marijn will now take some questions. I would ask, when you're ready for your question, please wait till you get the microphone. So we have a question over here. Please.
The Boston-Cambridge academic communities would seem to be a hotbed of innovation, and yet Bayer doesn't seem to have much of a physical presence here. Why is that, and is it likely to change?
Well, it's historically developed that way. We have a very strong presence in New Jersey and in San Francisco, and have chosen in the past not to fragment that further by having also a strong presence in Boston. So it's nothing against Boston, it's just the way that it has developed over time. Boston has a really unique setup that is envied by a lot of other cities in the world, with the combination of biotech, of medical devices, the universities here, the hospitals, the life sciences industries. So really a hotbed for healthcare innovation and, as I said, the envy of many cities in the world.
We have another one more. I think we're going to be short on time.
Well, your commitment to innovation is obvious, and since I study leadership and talk to a lot of leaders, I'm always interested in the personal conversations that you have with people, other than at an organizational level. Can you think of a time when you had a conversation with a researcher or someone and realized that the commitment you had made to innovation had really made a difference, had really driven innovation?
Yeah, it's often in companies, particularly if you are the CEO, it's very hard to spend time with R&D people because there's always another more urgent issue than R&D in front of you. And I know this, and what I've decided to do when I came to Bayer 3 years ago, I introduced a slogan that some people welcomed very enthusiastically, but more people did not. And that was, we need more innovation and less administration. So I made myself very popular with the 13,000 R&D people. But we have 115,000 employees. Why do I say it this way? Because it is amazing to see how in a large organization structures build up to check on each other, to audit each other, to talk to each other, to administer stuff, all forgetting that in the end, our only competitive capability that will make us win or lose is innovation. It's what happens in the lab and how we get it to the customer. And only, I think, when a CEO makes it that bluntly so clear, does the rest of the organization pay some attention to it. And of course, the R&D people in particular are thankful for that comment. As I said, it's not always appreciated by everybody.
One more question.
I know how strict Peter is on time here. And I can see the look in his eyes, even from here.
Marijn, I'm just wondering if you could share a forecast for the future of the European Monetary Unit and whether you're planning to do business in Deutschmarks.
Well, you know, there are a lot of countries in the euro, okay, more than there will be. Okay. I think what is happening now is that the European Union is a political union, not an economic union. And it's trying to buy time to put the dominoes of the different countries far enough apart that when Greece falls over, the rest doesn't go automatically. That's my interpretation of what I hear and what I see in the papers. So, you know, I think that model where a country can leave this union in a constructive way without affecting others in an uncontrolled way is something that I think is being designed, even though it's not particularly said that way. And then the question is, in 10 years, how many will there be left? We'll see. But I don't think they'll all be there the way they are now.